there, it's Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder here with the spoiler video. It's been a long time since I've done some spoiler analysis. I missed the last few sets just because I've just been out of Magic the Gathering, but I'm getting back into Magic the Gathering. I think taking a break every now and again resets the saltiness that I have towards the game. And I think there's some fun cards that I've been looking at so far from this set. I think the people are overblowing some of the mechanics. There are definitely some broken things so far identified, but typically, spoiler season, people just lose their minds thinking it's going to warp stuff, and then they forget that things like instant speed removal exists, and then we can come back down to earth and evaluate things accordingly. So let's just get into it right now. I'm going to go to the mythics through the rares with this video, and maybe we'll look at like commons or uncommons on another day. But the first of all is the Book of the Exalted Deeds. This is actually a pretty sweet card. So for 3 mana at the beginning of your end step, if you gain 3 or more life, you create a 3/3 white angel token. Again, it does say at the beginning of your end step. I really wish they would have said at the beginning of any end step, because this doesn't work on lifelink on the blocking aspect of it. And some cards have already existed, like the Griffin's Ari exists that does it for 2 life, and you get a 2/2 Griffin. But what's kind of cool about this one is the 3 mana tap exile Book of the Exalted Deeds. You can put an angel enlightened counter on an angel, and you can't lose the game, or your opponents can't win the game as long as the counter is active on just anything. It doesn't even have to be an angel. So this already with the Frost Haven is going to be a very, very difficult combo for many decks to deal with. And I actually don't think it's that out of the scope, at least until standard rotation occurs, because this card can just be shoot in any sort of deck that can gain 3 life. So you can throw this in the already existing life gain decks, and creating a 3/3 angel is not that terrible. For just a 3 mana investment. So I'm wondering if this actually will want to go with the Frosthaven, because you're already running the Snowlands and this, and then chucking it on that and just having you can actually race it. At that point, it is going to be, you have to activate, and so it'll be 6 mana. It'll be a 6 mana combo to put it on the land, and then you just never animate the land again. Your opponents can't win. That's kind of interesting. You can also put this on, of course, indestructible angels. They do exist, or hexproof angels, and that way it's very, very tough for your opponent to then win the game. Or this actually can come in handy for decks that just, let's actually zoom in here for you a little bit. Decks that just try to win the game without interacting with you. This is also a good sideboard card. So if they don't run any creature removal, if they're just like a solitaire-based deck, this is something that can just win the game, and they have no answers for it, and you're pretty decent at that point. So I think this is going to be at least a neat little sideboard card, and I'm definitely thinking it is going to see play in the mono-white versions. That you just put it on the Frosthaven, and then you just can't win the game. All right, so here's a card that everyone is overblowing. This is Limerich Desert Doom. It's a 5 mana for a 5/5. Has Ward 4 as long as it's untapped. So that one's actually quite interesting because of the Ward 4. And then when it deals combat damage to a player, draw a card. Then if you have fewer than 3 cards in hand, draw cards equal to the difference. So it's a good draw outlet, but typically these big dumb blue creatures that don't have an ETB effect typically are hard to put this in perspective with something like the Dreamweaver, or the one out of Theros, the 6 mana one that has pseudo hexproof, and then does very similar every time you draw a card, or you draw a card every time. I can't even think of the card right now, but it's a Theros card, and this one just pales in comparison to that one. I think, of course, you have to be running white at that point. Yes, there are some dragon decks with this going Prismari Dragons at the moment. Probably not. I'm thinking that it doesn't really fit with the curve of what they're trying to do, and so I think this one's a bit overblown for a card. It's definitely solid. It's definitely going to be a draft powerhouse or a sealed powerhouse, but I'm having a hard time seeing that this be shoot in many decks. I mean, maybe some decks, like more of the control-based decks, can do a switcheroo. You side out all of your removal spells. This card comes in, and then it also curves quite well with Cultivate, so there's an argument that it could go into like the Yorion decks at the moment, but I don't see it going more of a one-of in that particular deck. So it is what it is at this point. I mean, right there, compared with Yorion, and does it actually deserve its 5 mana slot compared to something like Yorion that just has huge setup and huge given that Ward 4 at that point, you can still, pay into the 4 mana. So at that part, Heartless Act is just 6 mana and you kill it. And that it's still very vulnerable to that. We still have things like Slow Shatter, or there is a couple other sacrifice type of effects that do exist in the meta at the moment. They could easily run to take care of this card. So again, it's untapped too. As soon as it becomes tapped, it's easy pickings for like a removal spell. Let's go into Lotless Spider Queen. This is a 5-mana planeswalker. Whenever a creature control dies, you put a loyalty counter on it. That's actually very, very interesting to get the -8 up to immediately if you have any sort of sack outlet. The 0s, you draw a card and lose a life, and then the -3s, you create 2 1/1 spider creature tokens. So the ultimate is when you get an emblem for -8, and whenever an opponent is dealt combat damage by one or more creatures you control, if that player lost less than 8 life this turn, they lose life equal to the difference. The emblem is kind of, I don't know, it's kind of meh. The draw card lose life is kind of cool for 5 mana, and this is an interesting planeswalker because immediately you can get it up to its emblem by sacrificing creatures in that turn, and also the ability to just create 2/1 black spider creature tokens, and then those die, you immediately get loyalty counters back for them. That's also something that's it's pretty interesting with a -3. So not sure where this would want to fit in. It does feel quite weak for a planeswalker at the moment. I mean, the draw card lose a life for 0, just the activated ability, the Phyrexian Arena type effect, typically does see play in a 5-mana planeswalker. So decks that do utilize that sort of effect, I think, are going to want it in as like a flex card to be able to draw cards. But again, the emblem isn't that backbreaking if you can get to the emblem. The -3 to create 2/1 black spider creature tokens with menace and reach is interesting, but then you're down to 1 loyalty. So again, this card doesn't seem as powerful as planeswalkers that have been printed in the past few years. Next up is another planeswalker, the Zerial Archduke of Avernus. 4 mana for a 4 mana loyalty planeswalker. The +1 creatures you control +1 with your own haste until end of turn. Haste is kind of awkward. I guess the turn after you can give your 5 drops, but the turn that comes out, it is going to be pumping +1/+0. Typically right now, Mono Red does not want this because this is the slot that is going to be filled with the Embercleaves, or going to be filled with the Torbrands that just do a better job. Maybe a go wide type strategy is fine, but you already have like the castle that can fill that niche. Creating a 1/1 Devil creature token for the 0 loyalty is pretty weak for 4 mana. For just an activated ability for a planeswalker that's taking your turn 4, which Mono Red is not going to be wanting to do that. The emblem is also interesting. You get an emblem, but at the end of first combat, you get an additional phase, additional combat phase. After the phase, there's additional combat phase. So kind of interesting again. Maybe like some cutesy Yorion decks could throw this in with Vorpal, and you have an 8 mana immediately emblem and then get 2 attacks. Possibly that could win the game. But right now, I just don't know if Azariel is powerful enough with either the +1 or the 0 ability. With as much rampant removal that's going around, if you don't have any creatures to pump, it's kind of a very weak ability at the moment. So not very impressed with this card either. We have Old Gnawbone, a 7 mana 7/7. Whenever a creature control deals combat damage, create that many treasure tokens. This is going to have some pretty cool wombo combos for sure. With this card, with creating treasure tokens, you can then create a ton of treasure tokens, cast a lot of big stuff. But typically, a 7 mana 7 for 7. Is kind of weak for other cards for 7 mana that you can do. Think of like the ultimatums at this point. Gnawbone could be a decent target for reanimation or things that cheat things into play, but as is, I think it's going to need to find a home that just gets more value than creating these treasure tokens. In Commander, though, this is going to be going in all those treasure-based decks. There are already many Commander decks that do want to utilize treasures that do run green, so this is going to be a very, very popular card for EDH. The first card that I actually think is the most playable out of the cards we've talked about so far is the Icing Death Frost Tyrant. This one's actually pretty interesting because we do have some cards that want to deal with equipments, and this is just a great curve. So it's a 4/3 Flying Vigilance for 4 mana, and then if it dies, you create an equipment token that you can equip, gives it +2/+0, and when it equips, it taps a creature defending player controls, and equip is only 2. So any sort of 4/3 on-curve Flying Vigilance card that then leaves back something, I think is very playable. I think this isn't going to be played more than a 1 of. It's just, if you see it, you see it. It goes quite well in the mono-white decks at the moment because it's also something that after the fact, you're going to have enough mana to then animate your land, equip it, and attack in for 6, which I think is, and tap something down. So that can be a finisher very, very quickly with just that with the animation lands. It's also going to make any of your like 1 or 2 or 3 drops that stuck around be able to get bigger and tap down opponents. So this is by far, like, we're not looking like modern or pioneer or historic playable, but by far with standard after rotation, this does seem to be a pretty decent card. In the mono white is really well positioned as, after the rotation. We do have, again, cards that want to deal with equipments after rotation, so this one does work with that. So this is probably it's not too exciting, but it does have that nice curve, and it does have that effect of leaving something when it dies. So we are going to lose Extinction Event too, so that's going to be good as far as exiling is concerned, because exiling is a huge factor right now, so you don't get a lot of die effects. But going forward, I think that this is probably going to leave back equipment more often than not. Then we have the Demolitch. The 4 mana for a 4/3. This spell costs 1 less to cast for each instant sorcery spell you cast this turn, and whenever it attacks, exile up to 1 target instant sorcery card from your graveyard, you can copy it, and you may cast the copy. So you get to copy the spell and cast the... Okay, so you still have to cast the copy. Okay, so you copy it and cast the copy for an exile. This one's interesting because Opt, you get some value off of it, but, I mean, it's still tough. You're still going to have to be paying the mana for the instants or sorceries, so it's never going to cost less than 4 at the moment. There's no instant sorceries that net up mana that I can think of. I mean, going back into Modern, you have Manamorphose. You have used to have things like Gitaxian Probe that could get pretty broken with this. It's not a bad card, just 4 mana for a 4/3, so keep that in mind that any sort of instance you've cast, like your Brazen Borrower, typically maybe you want a Brazen Borrower or something, you can still cast those cards and still reduce the cost, so it's not that bad of to be able to do more than one thing on a turn. But typically speaking, that's going to be a pretty tough card to play this turn, by reducing the cost of... Well, actually, it reduces the cost. Yeah, so I guess you could just, cast 4 spells in a turn and be able to get this. That's actually a neat little ability to create the tempo. It does have that Devotion to Blue, which gets kind of interesting with Thassa. Will this be a card that Thassa wants? Probably not in the format. It does get kind of interesting with Master of Waves, too, but is that like a card Master of Waves wants? We'll just have to wait and see. So anything, though, that can cast instant sorcery spells for free from the graveyard could combo with this. And you may cast it from your graveyard by exiling 4 instant sorcery cards. That's actually kind of the more interesting thing, because it feels Arclight Phoenix-ish. If you can self-mill a lot, if you can put a lot of cards in your graveyard, then the Demolitch can actually come back. If you can run it with the Crackling Phoenix, for example, in Historic, where exile cards still read, that's also kind of an interesting ability with this, and have some sort of tempo. So neat little card. Probably will see play in mono blue lists. Tempo... Yeah, there could be a tempo. Like, I'm going to see our Brazen Borrower. We do have some pretty decent tempo-based strategy, anything that self-mills to, or just casting a lot of. So there already is some kind of self-milling strategies in the format with the Titan's Nest that could work with this card. Yeah, we'll have to wait and see. This is definitely an interesting card, though. It is very removal prone. The 3 toughness is very relevant in this going forward in this rotation. We have the Book of Vile Darkness, 3 mana, so Grey Merchant loves this. At the beginning of your end step, if you lost 2 or more life this turn, you create a 2/2 black zombie creature token. So this one's actually pretty easy to lose life at the moment with the Agadeem's Awakening. So you can just lose a 3 life and get a 2/2. That's kind of interesting. And then you can exile the Book of the Vile Darkness, and artifacts you control, name the Eye of Vecna and the Hand of Vecna, to create a 8/8 black zombie creature token with indestructible against all triggered abilities of the exiled cards. So that is very interesting with the... What else is it exile? Do they have other triggered abilities? These other ones must. We'll have to see what these other cards... I don't know if they're spoiled or not. But this is an interesting type effect with losing life. Anything that allows you to lose life. If you pay life, you can get 2/2s every time at the beginning of your end step. And it's kind of a nice little curve with Grey Merchant of Asphodel to then add that 3 triple black. So definitely a cool little Brewers card. I would not be surprised that this does end up in my top 10 list of cards I want to brew around. Next up is the Flame Skull, 3/1 for 3, flying, can't block, and it's got Rejuvenation when it dies. Exile if you do. Exile top card of your library until the end of your next turn. You may play one of those cards. So it's got that sort of ability on it. I'm surprised this doesn't have haste. Play one of those cards. If you do exile the top card of your library until end of turn, you may play one. So if you cast Flame Skull this way, you can't play the other card, and vice versa. Okay, so... Oh, one of the exiled cards. So you can actually continue to play Flame Skull over and over, or the exiled card from the top of your library. So it is like an annoying card that continues to reanimate. But, I mean, right now there's better reanimation spells. Still does cost that pivotal mana. I'm actually not sure how well this card is going to... Yeah, 3 and flying can't block. I don't know. I feel like it does need haste. Like a 2/1 with haste would feel better. but the 3/1, it's not bad, but at the same point, it's not that great. It's not that great in the scope of things right now in the meta. A lot of things can kill it. A lot of things can chump block it. A lot of things can push past it. How well does it want to be hooked up with like Ember Cleave? Well, again, that's where I do get that residual value out of it. But it still has to die. Still has to. I just think there's better thing at the 3-mana spot at the moment than it's just a 3/1 flyer, just a kind of vanilla 3/1 flyer. We have Eliwick Tumblestrum, 4 mana for a 4/4 planeswalker, which has Venture into a Dungeon for its +1. Look at the top 3 cards of your library, or 6 cards of your library, reveal a creature card, and if it's legendary, you gain 3 life. So if it's a creature card you hit, put it in your hand. In the -7s, you get an emblem with creatures you control have trample, haste, and get +2/+2 for each differently named dungeon you've completed. So it's going to definitely work off of if there are any dungeons that are worthwhile seeing play. So that's what that one's going to hinge on. Other than that, it's kind of meh with the +1. The -2 is kind of cool. You get 2 activations of it. But yeah, that's kind of a weird ability at the moment in such a hyper-aggressive standard we have. Dancing Sword, 2 mana. Equipped creature gets +2/+1. When equipped creature dies, you may have Dancing Sword become a 2/1 construct artifact creature with flying and ward 1. If you do, it is an equipment. So it's something that can actually come back as a 2/1, and it's actually got a reasonable equip cost of 1. Yeah, definitely an interesting card. So after a board wipe, you still have a 2/1 back. Not bad, not bad. We do have a lot of support, like I said earlier, with equipments. So Zendikar had a huge equipment theme to it. And there are even cards from like Kaldheim that do work with equipment. So we'll have to see if equipment has enough to work with it. If it does, Dancing Sword is kind of interesting because it does bring back like a card then you can equip. That's not bad. It's got flying too. A 2/1 flying for 2 mana with ward 1. That's not bad at all. Not bad at all. Good in multiples. Yeah, pretty cool. Pretty cool card. Mind Flayer, 5 mana for 3/3. Dominate monster. When Mind Flayer enters the battlefield, you can control target creature for as long as you control Mind Flayer. Pretty good card, actually. Just gets any creature for 5 mana. 5 mana, 3/3. Gain a creature. Feels like a Agent of Treachery light, but the thing that made Agent of Treachery so good was it permanently gained it, and it could target non-creatures. So nice little tempo card, definitely a good draft card if you then can keep it protected. It's good, but typically speaking, we've seen some better cards that permanently gain it in the past. Even something like Hostage Taker has seen play, but Hostage Taker had the ability of then having it long term. The other legendary, we have the Even Death Dracolich. 4 mana for a 5/2 flash flying. Enters the battlefield tapped, and you may cast Dracolich from your graveyard of a creature not named. Even Death Dracolich died this turn. So this is actually pretty cool because some of my self-milling strategies did need a curve topper. Anything that has a sacrifice-based ability would be kind of neat, and we already do have a deck that I think this would go in. I think that black-red self-mill strategy would want this card because you are running a lot of sacrifice-based effects in that deck. They are running the Village Rites, for example. We are running, like Kroxa is kind of neat to go Kroxa, so 6 mana, you get back a 5/2. That's not bad. And it does have flash too, so if anything did die on your opponent's turn, you then can cast it for 5/2. So any sort of board wipe becomes a liability because then you can get a 5/2 dragon back. This one's neat. This one's actually pretty good. Yeah, I actually like this one a lot. We have the support for self-mill. It doesn't even have to be self-mill. It's just a 5/2 that you can continue to cast. So, yeah, pretty neat card. We have Zorn, 3 mana for 3/2. If you would create 1 or more treasure tokens, instead create those tokens plus an additional treasure token. This is going to be a powerhouse in EDH. It's going to they are really supporting treasures lately. It's kind of interesting, like a Winota Dwarfs deck, because if you have the 2/1 dwarf that creates treasure tokens that turn and attacks, you get 2 treasure tokens back, and you have the dragon too that it works with. Yeah, it's pretty neat with Zorn. It's going to be a very popular card. Keep your eye on this one if it has pre-sale prices for pretty cheap. All right, we'll have to see what the Trask does. So Trask is a legendary dinosaur. When it enters the battlefield, it was cast. It gains haste and ward 10. Whenever it attacks, it fights target creature defending player controls. So it does gain haste if you did cast it from your hand. So this card definitely wants to be cheated into play. 6/3. But these are typically, we see things like the Gaias. There was an 8/5/1 that was very similar to this. This was typically like Stompy decks, Great Henge decks can ramp it out later on. The Ward 10 is pretty good because that's similar to Hexproof. And then the ability to have a 10/10 haste creature against control. You get up to 9 mana. This is a tough... It doesn't have uncounterable, though. I'm surprised it didn't have uncounterable if you cast it against... can't be countered if it's cast. Yeah. And the ability for this to be cheated into play, but there are many ways to reduce the mana cost, I think, of creatures, right? It is a dinosaur. It works with dinosaurs, too, so all the dinosaur decks might want it in Commander. But, yeah, it's going to be a tough card to... Cheating into play is not bad either, though, because it just fights every time you cheat it into play. Not a bad card. Legendary actually kind of holds this one back. I think you'd only want one, though. We have the Guardians of Faith in the next card, Flash Vigilance. And when there's a battlefield, a number of other target creatures you control phase out. So they're bringing phasing back with this set. Flash is pretty good. Stops a board wipe. Yep, mono white sideboards are going to want this. Absolutely going to want this. And it's actually not that bit of a liability with like cards that got... it doesn't work with ETB effects, but like cards that the Skyclave Apparition, it does not kill it. So it doesn't leave the battlefield. So it doesn't give a copy or a copy back to your opponent. So that's kind of interesting. It doesn't kill your your enchantments that are enchanted to it. This one's kind of definitely kind of interesting card for Guardian of Faith with anti-board wipe card. It's spirits too, so spirits in Modern or Pioneer or in Historic get a new little tool that they can run in the sideboard with Flash. Pretty powerful card in the scope of things. 3/2 is where it wants to be. 3/2 Vigilance, yeah, not bad. I mean, it does die itself though to a board wipe, but so keep that in mind. It also does protect any like spot removal. Just phase them out and then boom. That's cool. All right, I like this card. Next, the Wizard Spellbook for 7. You exile target instant or sorcery card from a graveyard, roll a d20, activate this only as a sorcery. So now I'm going to have to like yell at everyone they need to spin down d20. I guess that's another reason why the pre-release kits are going to have spin downs, because spin downs are going to matter for this set. So a lot of people are pissed that there's dice rolling. We already have coin flipping. Who cares? It's just another way of randomization. So rolling d20 is very thematical for this set. I'm fine. Exile an instant sorcery card from a graveyard, roll d20, activate as a sorcery, copy the card for 1 through 9, copy that card, you may cast the copy by paying 1 rather than paying its mana cost for 10 through 19, and copy each card exiled with Wizard Spellbook, so it continues to actually exile them, I guess, if you get the 20. So the people that do luck sack the 20, that's going to be good. It's a value card for sure. 7 mana is quite a liability, though, for this particular card. Next up, we have the Westergate Regent, which is a vampire for 5 mana, flying, discard a card. I'm surprised they didn't put a class on this. That's kind of interesting. They typically started putting like classes, put a rogue on it, put a wizard on it. So this one's just a vampire, huh? Whenever Westgate Regent deals combat damage, you couldn't put noble on it. I mean, nobles even work for a few things. So you couldn't just put just any class. How boring is that? Anyway, whenever Westgate Regent deals combat damage to player, put a +1 counter on it. So it can work with +1. This seems like very filler. It's got ward, discard a card, you can keep it alive. I get it. It gets bigger, but it's very filler, very weak for what it does. Maybe that's why they didn't care to put a class on it. We have Delinia, Wild Mage, 4 mana for an Elf Shaman. Here we have the rolling of d20s again. Whenever it attacks, choose target creature you control, then roll a d20. Create a tapped and attacking creature that's a copy of a creature, except it's not a legend, so it can't hit itself. And the 15 to 20, create one of those tokens and roll again. That's actually pretty good for 4 mana. You get 6 power out of it. And then it has the ability to go kind of nuts with the copies. Another interesting card for sure. Instrument of the Bards. At the beginning of your upkeep, you may put a Harmony counter on Instrument of the Bards. Search your library for a creature card with mana value equal to the number of Harmony counters on Instrument of the Bard. Reveal it and put in your hand. If it's a legendary, create a treasure token, then shovel. This card's actually really good. So it's going to take a while to get this going. But once it's up to turn 4, you're going to get a 3 mana creature. And the thing is, you get a search for that converted equal to it. So you do want to get it kind of like Aether Vial. It does have a high converted mana cost, but I actually like this card, especially in decks that don't have a decent 1-drop. Just throwing this down as a 1-drop and then having it build up counters to where you want it, and then having that option. Like, think of how good like Castle Lockthwain is for just drawing a card for 4 mana. This is where I think this card is going to be good. So it's not going to go in decks, of course, that want like a 1-drop. And I guess just running one of these, you hit it, it's fine. You don't hit it. It is definitely sideboardable versus decks that you have to like grind out. I actually like this card a lot. Again, this is another card that I'm pretty sure will hit my top 10 list because it's definitely a brew around. It's a toolbox card. I typically really like toolbox as a mechanic, and I'm actually liking this one. Nadar, Selfless Paladin. This is a Vigilance. When it enters the battlefield or attacks, venture into a dungeon. 3/3, other creatures can go up +1/+1 as long as you complete a dungeon. So, going to work with that ability. Yeah, that's a way to venture in for 3/3. All right, we'll have to see what dungeons do, if there are any really broken ones. This one will actually go in that. It's a Dragon Knight, huh? It's a Dragon Knight. Yuan, Tai Malison. So 2 mana. It's a rogue. It's another 2-drop rogue. It can't be blocked as long as it's attacking alone, and when it deals combat damage to a player, you dungeon. So I don't think rogues are going to want it. It's going to be a dungeon-based card. Again, we'll have to wait and see for dungeons. It can't be blocked, but there's a lot of removal in the format that can eat it alive. White, for 2 mana for a 3/2 zombie soldier. A white enters the battlefield tapped. Whenever a creature dealt damage by white this turn dies, create a 2/2 black zombie creature token and exile that card. That's cool. So it enters the battlefield tapped. This is actually a pretty solid card for 3 mana. Great little blocker if it needs a turn before it can start blocking. It's pretty aggressive too, though. Not bad. Not bad at all for a nice little aggressive black card. We have Zalto, Fire Giant Duke. It's a 7/3 Giant Barbarian. Trample. Whenever Giant Duke is dealt damage, you venture into a dungeon. 7/3 for 5. You know, pretty on curve-ish with we have with red, kind of on curve-ish with doubling the damage. Or doing 2 extra damage, actually. Yeah, it's not that great, actually. This card's actually... Whenever it's dealt damage, removal is just going to kill it. Versus other things, though, it blocks, you at least get to go into a dungeon. It's pretty filler. Frog Hemoth. A frog horror. Trample haste for 4. When it deals combat damage to player, exile up to that many target cards from their graveyard and put a +1 counter on frog for each creature exiled this way. You gain 1 life for each non-creature card exiled this way. It's kind of a good little toolbox for self-milling strategies, so can kind of keep Kroxa in line a bit, and any other cards that are any other strategies that self-mill. And Trample Haste isn't bad for 5 mana. 4/4/5. It's of course not quite Questing Beast power level, but it's also a good toolbox card for sure for sideboards. Next up, we have the Oswald Fiddlebender. 2/2 bear for 2 mana. It's not a bear, but it's a bear. Gnome Artificer. Sacrifice an artifact, search your library for an artifact card whose mana value is equal to the mana value of the sacrifice art +1 put on the battlefield. This card is pretty broken if you can untap with it, for sure. Yeah, very broken, especially things if you've reduced. I wonder if like affinity type cards would want this, because you can then sacrifice like a 7 mana that you cast for free, and then go get an 8 mana, and there's some pretty powerful 8 mana artifacts for sure. Very interesting card. I think commander decks are going to love this. Ooh, this makes me a good pick for a Rogue Market episode for cards that actually work very well around this card. So, like, Staff of Domination, of course, is going to love this card to then be able to untap a creature and start to get a lot of value out of it. Yeah, I'm liking it. It's a pretty cool brew around card for sure. Yeah, so we'll have to do a Rogue Market episode for picking cards that work around it. Next up, we have Dragon Turtle. Dragon Turtle is a 3 mana Dragon Turtle. Imagine that. It's a Dragon Turtle that is a Dragon Turtle, which has Flash and Drag Below. When Dragon Turtle enters the battlefield, tap it, and up to 1 target creature an opponent controls, they don't untap during their next untap phase. So it doesn't also untap during its next untap phase. So you can't block and then tap. I mean, it's 3/5 for 3 mana. This is pretty decent, and you don't have to. Oh, yes, you do. Tap it and up to 1 target creature opponent controls. So you're tapping something, you have to wait a turn, you're actually going to get a swing before they're going to. It's not bad. Gelatinous Cube, 4 mana for an 4/3 Engulf. When it enters the battlefield, exile target non-used creature until an opponent controls until Gelatinous Cube leaves the battlefield. So it's pretty good. It actually takes care of it. And then put target creature card with mana value X exiled into its owner's graveyard. Target creature card with mana value. I was going to say, wow, this is just a hostage taker, but it's just a worse hostage taker because you put it back in their opponent's graveyard. So you have the ability, if you don't want it to, like, you think it's going to die, then put it back in your opponent's graveyard. So if then the Gelatinous Cube does die, they don't get it back. Yeah, I mean, it's fine. It's fine. It's a good little tempo swing with it. And very similar to something like a Skyclave Apparition. Meteor Swarm. Triple red X. Meteor Swarm deals X damage divided as you should with X target creatures and or planeswalkers. Not a terrible card. Sorcery speed. Vera Silvermoon Ranger. 3 mana, 3/3. Reach Ward. 1. Whenever you cast a creature or planeswalker, venture into a dungeon. Only triggers once each turn. And whenever you complete a dungeon, you get a 2/2. So again, it's all going to hem on how good dungeons are. Flumph. Defender Flying. When it is dealt damage, you and target opponent each draw a card. Kind of a commander card there. 0/4 flying. The Black Staff of Waterdeep. This is actually is pretty good with other cards that say your opponent can't draw more than one card per turn, possibly. I could see some combos with it. The Black Staff of Waterdeep, a 1 mana legendary artifact. You may choose not to untap it during your untap phase, and you can animate Walking Statue. Another target non-token artifact creature control becomes a 4/4 artifact creature token for as long as the Black Staff of Waterdeep remains tapped. So it's a good way to get that Inkmoth Nexus tapped, and as a 4/4 until you decide to untap it, and then you can animate something else. There are also some other artifacts that are decent to animate. Of course, Infect comes to mind, but yeah, not bad. Not a bad way to even keep making all your treasures 4/4s as well. It's like a renewable resource with treasures, which is relevant in Standard at the moment. Sphere of Annihilation, X and black. Enters battlefield with X void counters on it, being your upkeep, exile Sphere of Annihilation. All creatures and planeswalkers with mana value less than or equal to the number of void counters on it, and all creatures and planeswalker cards in all graveyards with mana values are exiled. So everything's just exile. So basically, you're giving your opponent a turn to deal with Sphere of Annihilation, or then you exile it. So again, there's our little extinction event replacement after rotation, but still kind of slow on the turn you might need it to work. But it's gonna see play for sure. Wish. You may play a card you own from outside the game this turn. Okay, well, it's a way to get back your exile zone. So, or from your sideboard. So not a bad card, I guess, if you have anything that deals with a lot of exiling. We have the Ochre Jelly. Trample. It is an X mana. Enters the battlefield with X +1 counters on it, and when it dies, if it had 2 or more +1 counters, you create a token that is a copy of it at being next, except the token enters the battlefield with half the +1/+1s. Pretty big if you can spend a ton of mana into it, and then it gets stuff back. We've seen these cards before. Next up, we have the... Guess we're into the uncommons here. Nope, we have some other rares here we'll get to. So we'll look at the uncommons another day. With the Grazalix, Ithalid Scholar, 3 mana for 3/2. Whenever a creature you control becomes blocked, you may return it to its owner's hand. So a creature you control blocks owner's hand, so it's good with any sort of ETB effects. And whenever one or more creature cards you control deals combat, each player draw a card. It's pretty sweet with ETB effects for sure. Really sweet with ETB effects. Not sure like Rogues wants this. Yeah, probably not. But any other like 2/1s, you got to think of that card earlier that had, you want to get some value out of ETBs. This works with it. The Vorpal Sword, 1 mana. Crib creature has +2/+0 on Death Touch. Equip 2, pretty reasonable to give 2/2/0 on Death Touch. Until in turn, Vorpal Sword gains 7 mana whenever a equipped creature deals combat damage to a player. That player loses the game. So if you can throw it on something that can then have evasiveness. That is actually something. It's pretty aggressive. I don't know. This is an option, I guess. But the 2/0 Death Touch has a lot of cards that it works well with. Anything that just do damage to a creature. I'm thinking Plukernos, but Plukernos is probably going to kill anything anyway. The Orb of Dragon kind, 2 mana for an artifact. Add 2 mana of any combination of colors. You can only spend it to cast dragon spells or activate dragon's ability, so it ramps up 1. And then you can sacrifice the Orb of Dragon. Dragon can look at top 7 cards of your library and put a dragon card into your hand. So it helps you tutor for dragons and cast dragons. Werewolf Pack Leader, 2 mana for 3/3. That's pretty good. Whenever the Pack Leader attacks, if you attacked with creatures with total power 6, draw a card. So it works with in multiples or any other card you've put out. If you have a nice little haster, a 3/3 haster. So what's a decent little card right now that's a 3/3 haste? Or just another... you'd want it as another 3/3 haster. Until in turn, the Werewolf Pack loses all abilities and becomes a 5/3, gains trample and isn't human, so it doesn't trigger itself with the 5/3. But this card's actually pretty good in Stompy. We have Tasha's Hideous Laughter for 3 mana. Each opponent exiles cards from the top of their library until that player has exiled cards with total mana cost 20 or more. This card's actually pretty brutal against decks that don't run a lot of CMC, because this could get a lot of their deck. And then if you have to do the average current mana cost of decks, I mean, this is usually getting like what, between 7 and 10, I would say, for 3 mana. Warlock class. That's an uncommon. Minion of the Mighty. Actually, we'll stop here. We'll stop here where the uncommons got, and then we can actually look at some of the rares we missed. Maybe we didn't miss many rares. We'll go to the rest of the rares here. We have the Minion of Mighty, which is a Kobold Menace, and whenever you attack with power 6 or greater, you may put a dragon creature card from your hand on the battlefield, tapped and attacking. Not bad. You got to have ways to pump this up, though, and have to have dragons in your hand. Yeah, we'll have to wait. Yeah, it's cool for Commander for sure. Circle of Dreams. Circle of Dreams Druid. 3 mana for a Druid that adds mana for each creature you control. It's pretty good. Pretty good in Elf Ball. Elf Ball does want like another card right now that works with it. I wasn't even checking to see if these other ones were elves. This is an elf. This one here that helps you. But Elf Ball is like super, it's like tier 3 right now. It's super close to actually being viable. And the Circle of the Dream Druids might actually make it viable. Untaps for 1 turn. You can get a lot of mana out of it. I think that's all she wrote for the rares. Maybe we've missed some rares here, but seems to be a pretty well-balanced set. I haven't seen anything that's just like overly broken at all. This is just a very, very decent set with, yeah. Again, nothing is going to warp standard. I don't see a card here that's going to warp standard, which is a good sign. But we have a lot of spoilers left to go. Haven't looked at the uncommons. Sometimes there's uncommons that are format warping and whatnot. But pretty impressed with the set. Let me know what so far your favorite card is. Definitely see some ones that are going to go on my top 10 list, I'm pretty sure. There are definitely some Catnip Kevin cards here, toolbox cards, ETB effects. Those typically go in my list. Hope you enjoyed this video. This has been Kevin with the Rogue Deck Builder. Thanks for watching.